You're just a wallet to us. My sister's voice echoed in my head, sharp and cutting. I had heard those words before, every time I hesitated, every time I questioned the price of helping. But that night, it stung more than ever. When I refused to pay for Emma's tuition, Karen had snapped at me, her words laced with disdain. You're just a wallet, she had said, as if it was the most obvious truth in the world. And maybe after all these years, she was right. I never imagined that the very family I worked tirelessly to support would see me that way. But that's exactly what had happened. To them, I wasn't Ryan. I was just the guy with the money, the one they turned to when things got tight. I was 32. I had built a life for myself, a career that paid well, but with every pay raise, with every step up the corporate ladder, the weight of my family's expectations only grew heavier. I had told myself for years that it was all worth it, that this was just a temporary sacrifice. But as I sat there at my desk that night, staring at the email from the university about Emma's tuition, it hit me. This wasn't a temporary sacrifice anymore. This was my life, and I was tired. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Sarah, my sister. I had known this was coming. It always came. Another request, another demand. I answered it, my stomach tight with dread. Ryan, Sarah's voice was tentative, like she was trying to gauge my mood. Emma's tuition, it's due soon, and we're short. Can you help? I sighed, rubbing my temples. This wasn't new. It never was. Emma, my niece, was bright, ambitious, and determined to go to college. She had dreams bigger than anything our family had ever hoped for. I admired her for that, but as much as I wanted to support her, I was running out of steam. I've helped before, Sarah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but I can't keep doing this. You know I'm stretched thin too. I've got my own savings, my own plans. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Please, Ryan, you're the only one who can do this. You promised me. The words hung in the air, heavy with guilt. I had promised. I had promised Emma that I would always be there for her. And I had promised Sarah, over and over again, that I would help them out when things got tough. But now I was wondering where the line was. When had helping turned into owing? I'll figure it out, I said, my voice tight. But this can't be the way it's always going to be. She didn't respond, and the silence between us was enough to tell me everything. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, calculating, assessing, trying to figure out how to manipulate the situation so she could get what she wanted. That was the pattern. They would ask, and I would give. And then they would ask again. The truth was, I had been giving for so long that I didn't know where I ended, and they began. Every choice I made seemed to revolve around their needs, their expectations. I had sacrificed so much to help them, money, time, dreams of my own. I told myself it was worth it. After all, family came first, right? But now, standing at the edge of this decision, I wasn't so sure anymore. I'll send the money tomorrow, I said, hanging up before Sarah could argue anymore. And just like that, I fell back into the cycle. Section 2. The weight of expectations. The next day, I found myself staring at the tuition bill again, my finger hovering over the Pay Now button. The amount was astronomical, as it always was. And though I had been doing this for years, helping out, making sacrifices, I couldn't help but feel the familiar pang of frustration. I had been running on fumes for so long. My savings, gone. My dreams, on pause. My personal life, forgotten. Each time I helped, I told myself it was temporary. But somewhere along the way, temporary turned into forever. A sudden text buzzed on my phone, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Emma. Hey, Uncle Ryan, guess what? I got into Stanford. My heart swelled with pride as I read her message. Stanford, the dream school. Emma had worked tirelessly for this moment, and I couldn't help but feel proud. She was brilliant, so much smarter than I ever was at her age. She deserved this. I'd always believed that. I smiled even as the familiar ache settled in my chest. That's amazing, kiddo. I knew you'd do it. You've worked so hard. I hit send and waited for her to call. I knew she was bursting with excitement, and when the phone rang moments later, I answered with a grin. Hey, Emma, I'm so proud of you. This is incredible. Her voice was shaky with excitement. Uncle Ryan, I got in. Stanford. It's real. I can't believe it. I knew you could do it, I said, my smile growing wider. You've earned this, Emma. All that hard work paid off. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, and then Emma's voice softened. Uncle Ryan, Mom said you'd help with tuition, right? And there it was, the unspoken expectation, slipping out as casually as if it were an afterthought. My stomach dropped. I had known this moment would come, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. I tried to steady my breath, to keep my voice calm. We'll figure it out, kiddo, I said, my words hanging in the air. We always do. But in my heart, I knew. I knew that figuring it out meant one thing. I was going to pay. Again. The cycle had started again. I didn't want to be the one to disappoint Emma. She was like the daughter I never had, and seeing her so full of hope, her future ahead of her, it made my heart ache with love for her. But at the same time, something inside me began to shift. I hadn't said yes yet. There was still time to make a choice. But the weight of my sister Karen's voice echoed in my mind, reminding me that it had never really been a choice. It was a demand, one that I could never escape. Karen was 5 years older than me, and for as long as I could remember, she had always known how to make her problems mine. When her marriage ended, she moved back in with our parents, bringing Emma along. I had just finished college and was trying to carve out a life for myself, but Karen made sure that wasn't going to happen without her help. Come on, Ryan, you're young. You don't have anyone else to take care of. We're just getting by here. I don't know what we'd do without you. Those were the words she always used, always reminding me that I had no family of my own, no one else to worry about. And each time I gave in. I paid for groceries, then rent, then Emma's school supplies, her camp fees, anything she needed. It was never meant to be permanent. I told myself that. But every time I helped, I found myself sacrificing more and more. More than I had planned, more than I had expected. Years passed, and it became normal. Helping out was just what I did. Karen had remarried to Dave, a guy with kids of his own, but even with a new family, the requests didn't stop. If anything, they only grew. You're the only one who can help Emma, Karen had told me one evening over dinner. Dave and I are stretched thin. The words came with that same familiar tone. Not a request, not a favor. It was a statement of fact. You make 6 figures, she said, as if that was the only reason I existed. You really can't spare a little for your niece? Of course, I didn't want to say no. Emma was a brilliant girl, full of potential, and I wanted her to succeed. But after all these years, I was starting to feel like something was off. Something was wrong with the way they saw me, not as Ryan, but as the ATM. When the time came for Emma to apply to college, Karen didn't even ask if I could help. It was just expected. The first year, I didn't think twice. I paid the tuition, the housing, the books, all of it. It cost me my down payment for my own house, drained my emergency fund, and I couldn't even think about relocating for that job I'd wanted. But I told myself it was worth it. Emma deserved the chance. She was a good kid, and I loved her. The first year, Karen was all smiles and gratitude. She praised me constantly. You're the best uncle in the world, she'd say. You're making Emma's dreams come true. But after a while, something changed. The gratitude faded. The praise turned into expectation. By the time Emma started her junior year, it was no longer a thank you, it was a demand. The tuition's due next week, Ryan, Karen had said casually. You haven't sent the payment yet. No, please. No, thank you. Just a reminder, as if I were some sort of service provider, a bill to be paid. That was when the first crack began to form. As the weeks dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling of resentment that had been quietly building inside me. The more I helped, the more it felt like I was losing myself. My time, my money, my energy, it was all getting drained. And for what? A thank you here and there. That was no longer enough. But even with that voice inside telling me to stop, to set boundaries, the guilt was overpowering. Emma was counting on me. She was about to graduate, ready to take the next step toward her future. How could I let her down now? One evening, as I sat at my kitchen table, going over my finances yet again, the familiar ping of an incoming text echoed through the silence of the apartment. Ryan, can you send the tuition payment? The school called again, and it's due tomorrow. They said they won't let Emma attend classes if we don't settle it. I read Karen's text 3 times before putting my phone down. The pit in my stomach grew deeper as the familiar helplessness washed over me. The quiet realization that I would never be able to walk away from this. I could already hear Karen's voice in my head. You're the only one who can help her, Ryan. You know Emma's counting on you. It was the same tired script, the one that always got me to fold. I had worked hard for what little I had. I had given up opportunities to be there for them, hoping that they would one day see it for what it was. But no, all they saw was me as a wallet. The sacrifices I'd made for Emma, the job offers I'd turned down, the savings I had drained, had never been enough. In fact, they had been taken for granted. The next morning, I woke up with a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself. I couldn't be the one everyone leaned on, only to be discarded once they got what they wanted. I was done. I had promised Emma I'd help, but I didn't promise to fund her entire college education while Karen and Dave sat back and did nothing. No, I couldn't do it anymore. I spent the morning drafting a message to Karen, something firm, something clear. It was time to set the record straight. Karen, I'm not paying for Emma's tuition this semester. I've covered the last few years, but I can't continue this. I'm not going to keep putting my life on hold to support yours. You and Dave need to take responsibility for Emma's future. I'm done. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the send button. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. What would she say? What would Emma think? Would Karen try to manipulate me again? Would I be the villain in their eyes? I took a deep breath and hit send. It didn't take long for Karen to reply. Her response came almost immediately. Ryan, how could you do this to Emma? She thought you were helping her. You promised. This isn't just about the money. It's about your niece's future. She deserves better. Her words were sharp, filled with anger. But under it all, I could feel the pressure, the guilt she was trying to place on me. She had always known how to twist things, make me feel like I was abandoning Emma. But for the first time in years, I wasn't going to back down. I had to remind myself that this was about more than money. It was about respect. It was about setting boundaries. I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just not going to be the only one responsible for Emma's future. You and Dave need to step up. I'm done being the one who fixes everything. I stared at the text for a long time, feeling the weight of my decision. But then something strange happened. The weight started to lift. I felt a small sense of freedom creeping in. Then, just as I thought the conversation was over, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Emma. Hey, Uncle Ryan. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Mom said you weren't paying for the tuition this semester. Is that true? Hearing her voice, something twisted in my chest. It was as if the world had suddenly shifted on its axis. I had always promised myself I'd never let Emma down, and now I was the one breaking her heart. I'm sorry, kiddo, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But I can't keep doing this. I've been helping for years, and it's too much. I can't put my life on hold anymore. You and your mom and Dave need to figure this out. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Emma spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. I understand, Uncle Ryan. I don't know what we're going to do now. The sadness in her voice almost made me want to take it all back, to send the payment and pretend like everything was fine, but I knew I couldn't. I knew this was the only way they would learn to take responsibility. I'm sorry, Emma, I said softly, but you're going to be okay. You're smart. You'll figure it out, and I'll always be here for you. But this can't be my responsibility anymore. The call ended shortly after that, and I was left staring at the phone, feeling the weight of the decision sinking in. The silence was deafening. For the next few days, I waited. I waited for Karen's call. I waited for Emma's text. I waited for some sign that I had made the right choice. But nothing came. No angry messages, no guilt trips. It was eerily quiet. I told myself it was good. I had set a boundary. I had stuck up for myself for the first time in years. But as the days passed, I couldn't help but feel alone. Then 3 days later, I got the call from my parents. "Ryan, sweetheart." My mom's voice was warm, but there was something off in it. "Can you come over for dinner tonight? Your dad and I haven't seen you in a while." I didn't need to ask if Karen would be there. Of course, she would be. My stomach turned, but I told myself to go. Maybe it was time to finally confront this head on, to make sure they all understood. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 7 p.m., like I always did. The moment I stepped inside, I felt the tension in the air. Karen was already seated at the dining table, arms crossed, eyes hard. Dad was sitting next to her, as silent as always. And my mom was in the kitchen, acting like this was just another family dinner. But when my eyes landed on Emma, sitting quietly across from Karen, my heart sank. She looked small, uncomfortable, like she didn't know what to say. She gave me a hesitant smile when I walked in. "Hey, Uncle Ryan," she said softly. The guilt hit me like a freight train. Dinner at my parents' house was exactly what I had expected. Tense, awkward, and filled with passive-aggressive comments I'd become all too familiar with over the years. Karen didn't waste any time. She wasn't interested in pleasantries. The second I sat down at the table, she launched into it. "You know, Ryan, I really don't understand what's going on with you." Karen's voice was tight, controlled. She wasn't angry yet, but I could feel the storm brewing just beneath the surface. "Emma's future is on the line, and you're just walking away from it all." I could feel my jaw tighten as she spoke, but I kept my face neutral, not giving her the satisfaction of seeing me react. "I'm not walking away from anything," I said calmly, though my insides were starting to churn. "I'm just not going to keep carrying your financial burden anymore. You and Dave have had plenty of time to save for Emma's future. I'm not responsible for that." Karen scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're so quick to put the blame on us. You think I haven't tried? Do you think I wanted to be in this situation? We've been doing our best." "No, Karen, you've been relying on me to do your best," I replied, the frustration finally seeping into my voice. "You've made me the backup plan for years, and I'm done with it. This was never supposed to be my responsibility. Emma's future isn't just my problem." The room was silent for a moment, the air thick with tension. My mom stood in the kitchen pretending to be busy, but I could tell she was listening. Dad, as usual, sat there quietly, avoiding conflict in his own way. Emma looked at me, her face a mixture of sadness and confusion. She was sitting at the table staring at the half-eaten meal in front of her. I could see her fingers gripping the edge of the plate, and for a moment, my heart softened. I hated that it had come to this. I hated that she was caught in the middle, but I knew I couldn't keep enabling the cycle. I had been manipulated for too long, and I had to make a stand. "I didn't ask you to do this, Ryan," Emma spoke up, her voice quieter than I expected. "I know you've been helping, but I didn't ask you to pay for everything. I know I need to do my part. I don't want you to feel like you have to do this for me." I looked at her, taken aback. For a moment, it felt like everything around me stopped. The guilt I had been carrying for weeks came rushing in again, but there was something different in Emma's eyes. She wasn't angry. She wasn't blaming me. She was just tired. "You shouldn't have to carry all this alone, Ryan," she added softly, "but I understand why you're done. You've done enough." I couldn't speak for a moment. I didn't know what to say. My niece, the one I had been helping all these years, was telling me she didn't want me to carry the weight anymore. I finally broke the silence, my voice thick with emotion. "I've always wanted to be there for you, Emma, but I can't keep doing it like this. It's not fair to either of us. You deserve better than for me to be your safety net, just because I'm the only one with money." The weight of my words hung in the air. I could feel the shift in the room, the moment when Karen realized this wasn't a conversation she could manipulate. The moment when Emma started to understand that I wasn't walking away from her, but from the cycle that had been draining me dry for so long. Karen stood up suddenly, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. "So that's it then?" she snapped, her voice rising with frustration. "You're just going to abandon us? You'll let Emma's future fall apart because you don't want to help anymore?" "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said, standing up as well. "You're the one who's abandoned your own responsibilities, Karen. You've relied on me for everything, and now that I'm done, you want to guilt trip me into giving more." I can't do it anymore." The argument was escalating, but I could see Emma shrink back in her chair, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to process everything happening around her. I felt a pang of guilt again, but this time it was different. It wasn't the same old guilt that had kept me trapped for years. It was the kind of guilt that made me realize how important it was to set boundaries, even if they hurt. "Ryan, this isn't just about money," Karen continued, her voice almost pleading now. "It's about family. It's about being there for each other." "Family doesn't mean bleeding each other dry," I retorted. "And it's not just about money, Karen. It's about respect. It's about recognizing when I've done enough, when I've given everything I can. I'm not your ATM. I'm not your backup plan anymore." There was a long, uncomfortable silence after that. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I stood there, facing my sister. She looked at me, and for a brief moment, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. But before I could dwell on it, Karen turned her back on me and walked out of the room. "Well, that went well," I muttered to myself, feeling a strange mix of relief and disappointment. I turned to Emma, who was still sitting quietly at the table, looking down at her hands. She wasn't crying, but I could see the frustration in her expression. "Emma," I started, but she cut me off. "I know, Uncle Ryan. I know you're doing the right thing," she said softly, but her voice cracked a little. I'm just scared, okay? I'm scared that everything is falling apart." "I get it," I said, sitting down beside her. "I'm scared too. But I promise you, we'll figure this out. You're strong. You'll find a way. And I'm here for you, always." She nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. The future was uncertain, and I couldn't fix it for her anymore. I couldn't protect her from the world. But for the first time in years, I felt like I had made the right decision. I had set a boundary, and no matter how much it hurt, I knew it was time to stop sacrificing my own future for theirs. As I left my parents' house that night, the silence followed me. The silence that came after the storm. I had done what needed to be done, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something bigger, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. For the first time, I wasn't the one who would fix everything, and that scared me more than anything else. Section 5. The final decision. Word count, 1,000 words. The university call. It had been a long day, filled with constant reminders of just how much Ryan had been giving up for his family. He sat in his apartment, mind buzzing, when the phone rang again. It was the university, and Ryan answered with a sigh, thinking it was just another update on Emma's tuition. But what the voice on the other end said made his blood run cold. "Hello, Mr. Ryan Thomas. This is Margaret from Eastwood University. I'm calling regarding your niece, Emma Thomas. We've noticed an outstanding balance on her tuition fees, and we wanted to remind you that you're listed as the financial guarantor." Ryan felt his chest tighten. Financial guarantor. The words bounced around in his mind, each syllable feeling like a punch to the gut. I'm sorry. What did you just say?" "Yes, sir. We have you as the guarantor for her tuition, and the remaining balance needs to be paid as soon as possible," the woman explained, sounding as if this was a routine conversation. But I never agreed to that," Ryan stammered, his voice rising in disbelief. "I didn't sign anything for this. No one told me I was responsible for her tuition." The woman paused. "I'm sorry for the confusion, Mr. Thomas. However, our records show that we received confirmation that you would be covering Emma's tuition fees. If you'd like, we can send you the relevant documents for your reference." Ryan's hands began to shake as he heard the words repeat in his head. "Sarah signed me up as her guarantor? Without asking?" "Thank you for the information," Ryan muttered, his voice cold as the anger began to simmer beneath the surface. He quickly ended the call and immediately dialed Sarah's number. Ryan's resolve. When Sarah picked up, Ryan wasted no time. "Sarah, what the hell is going on? I just got off the phone with the university, and they're telling me I'm listed as Emma's financial guarantor for her tuition. Why didn't you tell me about this? Why didn't you ask?" There was a long silence before Sarah's voice finally came through, defensive but tinged with an air of justification. "I didn't think it needed to be a discussion. You've always helped. I knew you would. This is just the next step, Ryan. Ryan clenched his fists, gripping the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. No, Sarah, this isn't just the next step. You don't get to make decisions for me without asking. You don't get to sign me up for things I never agreed to. I'm done being your backup plan. Sarah's voice took on a pleading tone. Ryan, please. This is about Emma's future. You promised me you'd help. She's worked so hard to get into college. You can't just leave her hanging now. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest as the familiar guilt crept in. But this time, it was different. I can't do this anymore. You've been using me for years, Sarah, he snapped, frustration boiling over. I've sacrificed my own dreams, my own future, to help you. And now you're just going to manipulate me into paying for Emma's education without my consent? There was a long pause before Sarah spoke again, this time in a quieter, more resigned voice. I didn't mean to hurt you, Ryan, but I can't do it alone. I need your help. Ryan took a deep breath, steadying himself before responding. No, Sarah, this ends now. I'm not paying for Emma's tuition. I'm done. The line went silent. Ryan could hear Sarah's breath catching in her throat, as though she hadn't expected him to stand his ground. But Ryan wasn't backing down. Not this time. The breaking point. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The phone rang again, but this time it was his parents. His father's voice was thick with disappointment. Ryan, what's going on? Why are you doing this to Sarah? She's struggling. Emma's future is at risk. You can't just walk away from your family. Ryan let out a slow breath, bracing himself for what was coming. Dad, I've been carrying this family for years. I've sacrificed everything. My savings, my future, my peace of mind. I can't keep doing it. I need to focus on my own life now. His father's voice cracked slightly. But your family. Family takes care of each other, Ryan. You promised. Ryan shook his head, feeling a surge of emotion rise within him. That's just it, Dad. I've been taking care of everyone but myself. I've kept my promises at the expense of my own happiness. But no more. I can't keep doing this. His father was silent for a moment. Then with a heavy sigh, he said, I don't understand, son. But if you think this is what's best for you, then I guess I can't stop you. Ryan's heart broke, but the weight of his decision felt lighter. For the first time, he wasn't apologizing for taking care of himself. Later that evening, Sarah called again. Her voice was sharp, as if she had been crying. You've made a big mistake, Ryan. Emma is devastated. You're breaking up the family over some money. I can't believe you'd do this. Ryan closed his eyes, knowing this conversation was coming. I'm not breaking up the family, Sarah. You are. You've taken advantage of me for too long. I can't keep bailing you out. You need to figure this out on your own. There was a silence before Sarah replied, her tone softening, but still full of pain. I didn't mean to hurt you. I didn't know what else to do. I know, Ryan said, his voice tinged with sadness. But I can't be the one to fix everything anymore. I have to live my life. As he hung up the phone, Ryan leaned back in his chair, his heart heavy. But there was a sense of clarity, of freedom, that he had never felt before. He had made the hard choice, the right choice. In the days that followed, Ryan's family struggled to come to terms with his decision. He heard from his parents again, trying to convince him to reconsider. But deep down, Ryan knew that this was the beginning of a new chapter in his life. He had learned to set boundaries, to take care of himself, even if it meant disappointing those he loved. And though he might not have the family support he once had, he felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time, Ryan was choosing himself, and that, in itself, was a victory. That's all for today. What do you think of Ryan's journey? Do you think he made the right choice? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for more gripping stories. Where are you listening from? Drop a comment and share your location with us. Stay tuned for the next chapter.